everybody. I am Patty Dorito, and I am the owner and founder of Holistic Healing Atlanta, which is a practice where I integrate the best practices of psychology with nutrition, wellness, and spirituality. I would like to also welcome everyone, and I'm happy to have you here. This topic that we're going to talk about is very near and dear to my heart. It's emotional trauma and stress and how it affects your health. And I will get into why it's so near and dear as we go through. It's something that affects all of us. And sometimes we don't even really know that these traumas are affecting us because it gives us a different, once we've been majorly stressed or we have trauma, it changes the lens that we see the world through. And it's usually in the unconscious. We're not even aware of it. So, anyway, I'm excited to jump in here tonight and start with what is trauma. So the title is Emotional Trauma and Stress and How It Affects Your Health. So what is trauma? So trauma can be what we call capital T trauma, or it can be a small t trauma, but it's a disturbing, a deeply disturbing or distressing event that overwhelms us as an individual, and we don't know how to cope, and it causes us to feel helpless and diminishes our sense of self and our ability to feel the full range of emotions and experiences. So, capital T trauma, and I'll get into some more, but the way it affects me and why it's so dear and near to my heart has to do with my husband. And he did give me permission to talk about this. So when he was 7, his mom asked him, would you please watch the baby? She was 6 months old. She was sitting on an infant seat on the dining room table and said, I need to take the 2-year-old to the potty. And so my husband was being a dutiful 7-year-old, watching his baby, probably playing with her and stuff. Well, then his little 4-year-old brother came and interrupted him, and they started wrestling like little boys do. And then the baby fell off the table. So he heard a thump, he ran upstairs, and he hid under the bed. And the ambulance came, took the baby away, and that night the baby died. So nobody ever talked about it in his family. Nobody said it's your fault. Nobody said it's not your fault. And developmentally, 7-year-olds think everything's their fault. So the lens that now he sees the world through is, I kill people. I'm not good for people, and I don't want anybody to dislike me, or I'm already bad. So we'll go through that a little bit more to talk about how that has impacted him, of course, but even in our marriage, that trauma has affected us. Well, for instance, if I just look at him with a disapproving look, and it might have nothing to do with him, he's figuratively under the bed and running away. Now, he's done a lot of work, so it's not really that big of a issue, but he does get triggered. He still has these moments where he feels like he's bad and he needs to do something. So I'm going to put a slide up with some symptoms of trauma. So some of the symptoms are shock and denial or disbelief. Can be confusion and difficulty concentrating. It can be anger, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, fear, shame, guilt, self-blame, feeling sad or hopeless, or feeling disconnected and numb. So, like, if you think about a child, if they are, say, hearing their mom and dad fight, how do you expect them to go back into school and concentrate? They're traumatized. They're the two people they love the most are fighting. So those are the kinds of things. If you see a child, I once had a child who just her behavior tremendously changed and overnight in school, and she was very anxious and just feeling really sad. So we had to do a little digging to find out what had happened to this child. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what does trauma, what are the types of trauma that we have. So there's abuse. So there's emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. So emotional abuse is where, you're put down, you're afraid that you're not good enough, people maybe swore at you, kind of just made you feel small. The physical abuse, it could be grabbed, pushed, shoved, somebody threw something at you, and did it leave a mark? It doesn't have to leave a mark. If something's coming at you, you're gonna feel that abuse. And then sexual abuse is being touched or fondled. And in my experience as a therapist, it doesn't matter whether it's fondled or rape, or it sends the child off into a whole different off the rails. And then there's household challenges. So how is the mother or stepmother? Did they get pushed? Did they slap? Did they had something? What did the boyfriend, the husband, the stepfather? What did they do to the mother? Nobody wants to see their mother being bullied or hurt. I've had somebody whose father had pulled a gun on mother. Well, if that's not terrifying for a child. Substance abuse in the home. It doesn't matter whether it's street drugs or it's alcohol. If it's being abused, it's scary to the kid, and the parents can't be present if mom or dad or boyfriend, girlfriend are high or drunk and doing stupid things, or just not paying attention to the child. And then there's mental illness in the household, and so somebody's depressed or anxious, or maybe have attempted or completed a suicide. That is a terrible, terrible trauma. Even parents divorcing, separation and divorce is very traumatic to a child, because the two foundational people in their life have cracked the foundation, so to speak. And then, did somebody go to jail? Did somebody do something wrong, and now your family's different than everybody else's? The next one is neglect. So there's emotional neglect. Did someone not let you know that you were special and felt loved? Did you feel part of a family? Sometimes a member gets sort of put to the side for whatever reason, or didn't feel supported. Maybe great news came and nobody really cared. Or, like you meet your milestones and nobody's there to celebrate. You get your license, or you did really well on a test and nobody even notices you. And then there's physical neglect. And that was, did you have food in your belly? There's lots of kids that go to school without any food. And so it's hard to feel a part of things, but you're neglected. Did your parents take you to the doctor if you needed to go to the doctor? Did you have clothes, or did you have holes in your shoes and your pants too high? Okay, so the next question then is, what does trauma do to a person? Why is it so get locked into the body and the brain? So when a trauma occurs, or a major stressor, adrenaline will rush through the body. All of a sudden, your heart's beating faster, you're breathing a little bit differently. You might feel tension in your head or your shoulders or your neck. And then your memory of what has happened gets imprinted into part of your brain called the amygdala, which coordinates your response to things in the environment. It processes fear, and it's involved with emotions, feelings of pleasure, and memory. So, and then the energy of all that trauma is stored in different body tissues. And there's been a lot of research to kind of prove this has gone on. And then that stored trauma can lead to pain and progressively erode a person's body's health. So I'm going to come back to all that in a minute about the CDC, and Kaiser Permanente did a study in 1995 to 1997. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. But we have two parts of our brain. I mean, there's more parts of our brains than that, but we have the sympathetic part of the central nervous system, and we have the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic part of our brain is fight, flight, or freeze. And so when we have a trauma, we definitely go into the fight, fight, or freeze. And the body has a rapid, involuntary response to danger or a stressful situation. And it flash floods hormones into the body, and it puts the body on high alert, and the heart rate goes up, and it sends extra blood to the muscles. So if you think, this goes back to, if a lion is coming to eat you, you need to run. You don't need to think, you don't need to see, you don't need to reproduce, you don't need to digest, you need to run. So the muscles are full of blood being pumped into it. Okay, so when trauma happens, a lot of times our bodies stay in that sympathetic part of the central nervous system, gets locked in, and our bodies are not made to stay in the central nervous system, the sympathetic part of the central nervous system. You know, our body's made to go back and forth. So like we get on the road in Atlanta and we have to kind of a lot of times move into the sympathetic to like be on high alert so we don't get killed driving along. But the other part is the parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic is the rest, digest, relax, heal. And that part of the body undoes what the sympathetic nervous system does. And it conserves energy, it slows the heart, it slows the respiration, and it also can increase the intestinal and gland activity. So you can see that if we're stuck in the sympathetic, the fight, flight, or freeze, it can lead to a lot of harm. And again, a lot of us tend to be in that sympathetic part. So that study that I was talking to you about was done by, again, the CDC and the Kaiser Permanente, and it's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences. And they looked at children from the ages of 0 to 18, and they wanted to see, you know, going back to those traumas, what kids went through and what the effect was on these children. So 64% of the children in this study had at least one adverse childhood experience, which is also called ACE. And then the CDC also said that 85% of diseases have an emotional element to it. So they're putting the two together. So the ACEs have a lasting negative effect on our health and well-being. It increases our risk for injury. It increases our risk of impulsive behavior, risky behavior, starting sex a lot earlier, and there's a lot more sexual transmissions of because of early sex and risky behavior. Again, this goes back to the ACEs studies because and then we have maternal and child health problems. We have drug and alcohol abuse because of the ACEs. And then there's chronic diseases such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, suicide. It is related to the number of ACEs. I did in my master's program a study, like, can you predict who's going to end up with post-traumatic stress syndrome? So you have your war vets, you have your ambulance drivers, your police officers, you know, which ones are going to be able to kind of navigate through that? Because 1 in 4 soldiers will come back from war and have post-traumatic stress, but 75% are okay. So what's the difference? But the more ACEs a person has, the more likely they're going to end up with a post-traumatic stress. So I thought that was really kind of interesting statistic. So it also, again, the more ACEs people have, it causes people to move more frequently. They have more toxic stress. They have more relationship problems. They have unstable work histories, and they struggle with finances and jobs, and they have sort of a low grade or depression throughout their lives. Okay, so where is this trauma stored? So we have the conscious mind or brain, and we have the subconscious or unconscious mind. So the subconscious or the unconscious mind is just below the surface of our thinking, and it's very powerful, and it directs our course of life. It actually is the lens that we look through, and 95% of us operate in the unconscious mind. So we do things and we don't even know why we're doing this. So there's a high body-mind connect, and then this unresolved emotional stress or trauma affects the nervous system. And again, it leads to a physical, mental, and emotional breakdown. So how do you know if you have unresolved trauma or stress? So besides some of the earlier things I said, are you anxious? Are you extra nervous? Do you worry a lot? How's your sleeping? Sometimes there's sadness and depression, and depression and anger tend to be linked very closely together. Sometimes in a person, you might see the person very angry, and that's also unresolved trauma. It's depression. It can be. Okay, more GI issues. People can feel fatigue, they can feel pain, there's substance abuse, and another big thing is relationship issues. So when someone's dealing with a big trauma, it is going to affect the relationship. For instance, I'm going to tell you again with my own marriage that when something happens between us and he's feeling like I'm disapproving, he would disappear. And then I would be left like, well, what just happened and what's going on? But he couldn't stay present in that moment. So the relationship would break down some, kind of figure like, well, what just happened? Why is he gone? And why am I here? Am I the big bad guy? Because I mentioned this kind of stuff to him. So, to my husband's credit, he's done a lot of his own healing and work. And, every Tuesday he would say, oh, I got to go see Sarah tonight. I don't want to go see Sarah tonight. So, kudos to a person who is going through that, because not just for the relationship for himself, but for our relationship. And I'm very appreciative of all that he went through. So there's lots of ways to start dealing with trauma. So, you can start doing slow breathing, because when your body's in the sympathetic, your brain is thinking, go, 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 go. But if you slow down and start doing deep belly breathing, mindful breathing, that slows the brain down. It's oxygen getting to your brain. And, one of the things people can do if you're anxious or, being flashbacks, is to start saying, okay, what are 5 things I see right now? What are 5 things I hear right now and touch and feel? And then you go down to 4, because your brain can't do 2 things at once. And it's going to slow the brain down. I've had people have a panic attack in my office, and we just started counting backwards. The person couldn't do it. So I kind of worked, starting with 30, did it with this person. There is a method that people use, EMDR. I do not use it. I have nothing against it. I don't really know that much about it. Some of my colleagues have used it. There is something called brain spotting. You can look these up. You can find if EMDR is something that you want to do to deal with your trauma. Google EMDR and providers in the Atlanta area or wherever you may be living. There's brain spotting. So again, that is what my husband did, which was very helpful to him. This is before I started doing what I do. And then there's the polyvagal theory, and that is, so you have the vagus nerve or the vagal nerve, and that's the longest nerve in your body, and it connects the brain all the way to your major organs, the stomach, the intestines, the heart, the lungs. So the thought is like when you have a thought like, uh-oh, something's happening here, it affects your stomach. You get butterflies in your stomach and your breathing changes and your heart rate goes up because it's connected. So when people are a lot of trauma, they have a low vagal tone. And if you are good with the parasympathetic, you have a higher vagal tone. So one of the things they want to do is to strengthen the vagal nerve. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Again, there's an article that a man named Joe Cohen wrote. It's the 32 ways to stimulate your vagus nerve. But so the first one is cold exposure. Now, I'm going to tell you, I am not going to take a cold shower. So that one's off my list, but it could be just making yourself cold. Go out on a cold winter day and stand outside and get cold. It's deep and slow breathing. It could be singing, humming, chanting, gargling. Those things also help the vagal nerve strengthen. Taking probiotics can help. meditation and prayer, exercise. There's also taking an omega-3 fatty acid can also help increase the vagal tone and activity, massage, socializing, and laughing. Those things are all real important. Now I'm going to say something about the two supplements that are just mentioned there, the probiotics and the omega-3 fatty acids. There's a lot of junky things on the market. And it's, I don't really want you to waste your money on, don't go to the local drugstore, or even sometimes, I hate to say it's like Costco, big box stores. A lot of times those are not good enough for people. If you are burping up fish oil, it's rancid. I can just tell you that. And the probiotic, probiotics are the thing. So it's in everything. You can get it in just about all the foods and drinks you want, but it's not strong enough to get through the stomach and into the intestines where it needs to be. So that's just a little caveat. And another thing too is changing your diet and your lifestyle. Okay. But you can do all those things. But my experience as a practitioner is that no matter what I did to help my clients when there was trauma, it just seemed like we would talk in circles and we really never got down to the root of it. Maybe they felt like they were stuck, they weren't good enough, or something's happened to them and it's their fault. So I have started using something called quantum neuro reset therapy, more than like a year and a half, almost 2 years, and QNRT is the shortened term for it. And I love it because it's innovative, it's very different, it's non-invasive, and there's no drugs involved. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone. And I see life-changing results in it. So the premise of the QNRT is that all trauma, whether it's physical or emotional, is stored in the limbic system, which is part of the brain, and it stays there until it's released. And so with QNRT, we identify maybe the ACE, the adverse childhood experience, or some unconscious thinking, and it helps reset or release the trauma or the stressor that's stored in the brain. It's not new age. This is just neurology. And, people ask me, is it new agey? But it's not. It's just science and neurology. But it helps reprogram the brain to have better coping mechanisms. So all along you've used certain coping skills to survive, but some of those also involve some false beliefs and negative patterns and unwanted core drivers. So I have a slide here for the core drivers. These are not all of them, but the core drivers take us away from the truth of ourselves, and it creates an unhealthy self-image, so that unconscious mind will continue to hold false beliefs at any cost. Again, you're running a background program in your brain that says, and you filter everything through those life circumstances or those core drivers or beliefs about. So I'm going to mention just a few of them. This is not like an exhaustive list at all, but some core drivers might be that I'm powerless, that there's no way out. I can work extra hard, and I'm only working extra hard because I believe I'm inferior. There's nothing wrong with working hard. It's admirable to work hard, but feeling like I'm a victim. Okay, unreal. I have to be someone to be accepted by others, and I have to overanalyze myself all the time to say, who am I? And you almost have a unreal expectation of yourself to be loved by someone. Unsafe. It feels like something bad is always going to happen, and this is a big one. When's the other shoe going to drop? And can I trust another person? If you're in a relationship and that person doesn't trust you and you don't trust them, there you go. I mean, you probably have some underlying core belief about yourself that comes from your childhood. Then we have unlovable. It's feeling like everybody else is loved, not me. I'm not welcome. I don't fit in. I'm never going to fit in. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me, which, and all these ones I just mentioned are kind of like kissing cousins of each other. The next one would be unworthy. And it's like, I don't have any real value. I have to be a human doer because nobody would love me if I just was me. I'm not good enough. Okay. So the next thing with QNRT is we also look at negative patterns or self-sabotaging behaviors. And these developed when 5 fundamental needs of a child were not met. So every child has these 5, we have a slide for this, I believe, the 5 fundamental needs. So basic safety. Is that child feel safety emotionally and physically and spiritually? Are they cherished and loved? Do they feel safe? Are they feel free to go explore the world? I did a talk a couple weeks ago with Caitlin Byrne on attachment stuff, and this is kind of goes along with that. Autonomy. Can I individuate? Can I be my own person? Can I be separate from my mom and dad? Can I be separate from my sisters and brothers? Can I be my own person? The next fundamental need is self-esteem. Am I basically a good person? Now, I think sometimes society's gone the other way where every kid gets a trophy, whether they win or lose. That's not real building up self-esteem, but that's genuinely taking an interest in the child and say, you know what? You are somebody. I believe in you. The next one is self-expression. This is where a child can feel safe enough to say, well, I don't agree with this, and I'm saying in a respectful manner. I see a lot of times children are either tamped down because they're saying something, but sometimes they haven't learned how to respectfully state what they want to state. So can that person say, this is important to me, have an opinion that's not shot down? And it's also really important, again, for the parents of the children to set realistic limits, giving kids freedom to do whatever they want, come in whenever they want, do whatever they want. That's not, kids want safety. I had a girl that she was probably 13 and she had issues with her dad. And I asked her when her dad was present, I said, so you want your dad to be firmer with you? Yeah. So you want your dad to set limits on you? Yeah. I said, are you going to rebel? Oh, yeah. But you want your dad to set limits? Yes. And the first time I heard that, I've heard that over and over, I was shocked that girl she wanted to be put into, to have boundaries, firm boundaries. Okay, so without these 5 basic things, then you have the negative patterns that might include things like, I'm a failure. I expect, and if I'm a failure, I might also expect everybody else to be perfect too. It's like, sometimes people, if they have a negative pattern, and these are self-sabotaging, especially in relationships, I can't do anything but fail, and you better not fail me. Another negative pattern is feeling defective, underlying feeling flawed. There's something wrong with me. The next one is feeling unlovable. And that person with that negative pattern, it's easy for them to give love, but they have a hard time accepting love. Or sometimes they try to earn love in all the wrong places. Another one is abandonment. And it's fear that somebody's going to leave you and difficulty connecting. Again, if you're in a relationship, that the person or you are having a hard time connecting, you probably have some negative patterns that are going on, going back to lacking those 5 basic things a child needs. And then there's unrelenting standards is another negative pattern. And that's like, I have to be perfect. It's all or none. Or sometimes it's obsessive compulsive, OCD. So people will see life through these lenses, these core drivers and these negative patterns, and then they just filter everything, their relationships, their work. And if you don't deal with these things properly, the brain will start to use those things as a weapon for self-destruction and have a lifetime of unhealthy patterns and misery. And again, if they're not dealt with it, according to the CDC, you're going to see more cancer, diabetes, heart disease. You know, that's the studies. So in QNRT, this is what I do, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot because it's kind of complicated to explain, and it's innovative, but it's where we identify negative patterns, we identify core beliefs, as well as we identify specific traumas, and then we reset those patterns and beliefs and traumas that are locked into the brain so that the person then can act like they want instead of being reactive. So like with my husband, you know, instead of him reacting as a 7-year-old and hiding under the bed or disappearing emotionally from the relationship, whether it was me or with my children, he can stay present and say, you know what, I'm not 7 years old anymore. I don't have to have this core belief that I'm flawed and I'm bad. So if you want to know more about it, you can contact me through my website, phone, or my email. I'm more than happy to talk to you. If anybody has any questions about the program tonight, you can contact me again through that. Or if you have any questions now, I'm here. Let's see, I have the flyer. Oh, so for next week, we have a very exciting, it's a little bit going on to into the fitness world. So this is a journey. It's a very cool story, and it's the guest speaker is Ty Hambersham, and it's his story of being sedentary, overweight, unhealthy, to a very healthy guy. He's an aerobics instructor, and he's just a joy. So I hope you listen into it next week. We have topics coming up on men's issues. We have topics on grief. I don't have all of them in my head right now, but please follow me on my Facebook page, Holistic Healing Atlanta. I also have a YouTube channel. Please follow that. I appreciate if you let your friends know about this if you think it would help them. And you can also look back at previous sessions that I've done. So, you know, how to fall in love, be in love, stay in love is one of them. We did one on attachment. We did one last week on reading food labels. What's in your food and is it poisoning you? So yeah, and if you have any topics that you would like me to speak on, I am more than happy to. So thank you for the time tonight, and I look forward from hearing each of you. Good night.